Hey guys, thanks for joining us on Suspenders of Belief. This week's episode is brought to you by Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Remember, kids eat free every Tuesday.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm here with my brother. We just watched Willy's Wonderland.
It's uh it's definitely a movie.
Is it though?
Is it though? That's what we're here to find out.
So, what was this movie?
It was a movie. It was made in 2020, directed by one Kevin Lewis. The basic gist of it is Nicolas Cage, our hero, is roped into spending a night in a family-themed restaurant in order to pay for car repairs. It seems, of course, that the animatronics are alive and murderous, and there's also some sort of plot, a conspiracy going on with the townspeople and the police to try to cover up the fact that these animatronics are murderous and have murdered in the past. And basically, the question is, can Nick Cage discover the plot or at least survive one night in Willy's Wonderland?
And just in case you, I don't know, have been hiding under a rock for the past, let's say, 10 years, you might not know that this is a maybe subtle, slightly subtle reference to
So
another
subtle.
another property called Five Nights at Freddy's, and it has some interesting differences, some interesting choices that they've made to separate it from what you'd expect from a movie like Five Nights at Freddy's. One of which being that from the box art, it's just Nicolas Cage and a bunch of animatronics, and you would expect that to be the movie. But instead, they have this idea where they want to combine it with these like horror cliches, I guess just to up the body count. But it's a very strange choice because if you're going to rip off Five Nights at Freddy's, one of the things that works the best is the slow building of tension. And this movie wants to have its cake and eat it too, and its tone is all over the place. So let's just jump on into it.
I'm not as familiar with Five Nights at Freddy's as you are. I have a vague understanding of it. And if I were to try to adapt it, I would spend more time making it more atmospheric and not, like you said, not have the group of teenagers, the slasher body count, things like that.
Yeah, the idea that you have a person in a environment that they're uncomfortable, that they're unfamiliar with, the fish out of water story, it works in and of itself where this character doesn't know what's going on around him and he's kind of like slowly discovering more about it and figuring out what's the real plot. But this movie takes everything you'd expect from a movie like this and just throws it out the window because our main character, who we'd assume is our protagonist, is completely unrelatable.
Yeah.
You get the smallest glimpses into insight. Like the few things that we do know about him is that he was former service because of a quick flash of dog tags hanging on his rearview mirror, and he likes rock music. We know so little about this character.
I got the impression that he was on the spectrum.
Is that you wanting to add something to the character, or do you actually have something to support that?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily contextual in the movie, but it seems like it because he's not quite right. And it's not like I'm an expert on this. I'm not going to try to make any kind of statement about it, but it just feels like he's not quite all there. The fact that he's very systematic about when it's time to take that break to drink his energy drink and play his pinball and blah blah blah. It feels very OCD in like the very baseline kind of way. But yeah, there's nothing really to take away from that. The fact that he doesn't speak seems like it's trying to be a choice to be really cool and edgy, but it just prevents you from making any kind of connection to him. We do as an audience because it's Nicolas Cage, but if you'd swapped this actor out with somebody else, it just would have been kind of bland. Like, oh, it's the one guy again.
And this is what I was saying before about the trying to have its cake and eat it too sort of thing, where it wanted you to have this very awesome, kick butt main character, but they also couldn't just have him immediately just take care of all the animatronics or the movie would be over in 5 minutes. So it's
Yeah.
almost like the screenwriter, I'm presuming, had to come up with ideas that would stop the action from happening. And so that his punch pop soda cans that he has to religiously stop whatever he's doing mid fight anything to stop and go take this break and drink his soda. And we never really given any kind of insight as to why. It's not as though he found like an employee punch card that said like 30 minutes of rotation between activities. Like there's no in-universe reasoning other than just we seeing him do it and trying to grasp at straws as to why.
The owner of the restaurant did say something about make sure you take plenty of breaks, but that's it. There wasn't any structure to it. There wasn't any further instructions about it whatsoever. It was just like, hey, just take breaks. And it's almost like he took that to heart
Right.
in a really weird way. Like I said, initially my thought was that this is all Nick Cage bringing this, just like he wanted to do it. And it's only because I feel like it's you have the structure of the movie, and then you have the weird stuff with the breaks and the pinball that has clearly been inserted, well, almost artificially. And it makes me think like it's a separate party, whether it's Nick Cage or not, I don't know. But it's somebody else came in and said, we've got to put something else in there because it feels disconnected from everything else.
Well, let's dive a little deeper into some of the specifics. This
Sure.
movie did do some rather creative choices. I like the logo itself, the Willy Weasel character. They
Yeah.
do this
Yeah.
this great cute cartoon style of like the logo on the front of the building, and he looks fantastic. He looks like they did a reimagining of Chuck E. Cheese a number of years ago. Before, he was very looked like an animatronic. Even the cartoon version of him looked like it. And then very recently they've updated him to be much more cute and kid friendly. And this Willy Weasel logo that supposedly has been around from 1984, which doesn't make any sense because that's not what a cartoon weasel would have looked like drawn in 1984.
No.
But I
No.
loved his style. I loved how cute he was.
Yeah, he looked great. Not so much the animatronic.
I also like the punch pop. It was heavy product placement of a fake product. And again, it's
Yeah.
it's almost integral to the plot, but without any kind of explanation.
It was a good way of doing that because it had it been a license, it would have been really annoying. It would have felt like they just paid for the movie. Had it been like Mountain Dew, I don't know, they don't even make their energy drinks anymore, whatever the brand was. If it was something like that, it would have been a little too obvious and a little too stupid. So the fact that it's fake makes it kind of charming. So that was a good choice.
And it's just called Punch Pop. You mentioned energy drink, and I wasn't sure upon watching it if it was supposed to be an alcoholic drink, if it's supposed to be an
Yeah,
energy drink, if it's just supposed to be a soda. I mean, it's literally called Pop. So I think it's
yeah.
just supposed to be a soda.
It's just supposed to be soda. I think the impression that I got that it was an energy drink because it seemed like it was in a taller can,
Mhm.
but that may have just been me.
There were so many little choices with some of the set design and control. Like there was this truck driving character who was constantly chewing on this Slim Jim stogie. I don't know
Right. Yeah.
what was going on with that. It felt like the part that was in his mouth was like encased in plastic, and I don't know if that was to keep it from dissolving, so they only had to buy one Slim Jim. I have no idea.
It's like it's coded as being a cigar.
Mhm.
You know, at a glance, if you were just taking a picture of this character, you'd be like, "Oh, he's got a cigar in his mouth." But it's almost like maybe he was like, "I'm trying to quit smoking. I don't want to put a cigar in my mouth the whole time. Here, have the Slim Jim. It looks like a cigar." Okay, it's just some kind of weirdness going on. Again, not explained, and you can't really attribute it to budget necessarily either.
He's doing that like overcompensating. I'm trying to look cool by chewing on a toothpick, or Arnold used
Yeah,
to
yeah,
chomp on stogies back in the 80s. Switching into something that another thing that I did like, the very first time that Nicolas Cage enters the restroom, behind him you see a glance of the men's room sign. There's this little stick figure, and it's like he's got his legs crossed, like he can't hold it, and he's trying to make it to the
yeah.
bathroom, and it's adorable. But the next two times that you see that restroom sign, once is right after a animatronic has gone into the restroom, and then again from the main room where you're by the stage, you see it over there by the ball pit. It's got a completely different sign where it has a boy and a girl.
Yeah, I'm guessing that was just an editing mistake. Some of the stuff that I liked in terms of the editing, they definitely had the Edgar Wright fast cuts down
Mhm.
for a lot of the stuff, where it was clearly aping off of that, because it was a way to try to be concise. There was a couple of times where I was all like making fun of him using an old MST3K quote, where
Mhm.
it's like, show it all, where it would take way too much time to show a character walking across the room or whatever. It's the old trope with any kind of old movie when they show somebody parking, it's like they're padding for length and they feel like it's necessary to show the character pull up and park. There was a little bit of that, but for the most part, it was concise in its editing. It just there were whole sequences that weren't necessary. They were well edited. They were just unnecessary.
The other thing about the editing that jumped out to me is nuts. There are several fake deaths, which I still can't understand why they left the implication that okay, now these characters are dead. Oh wait, now they're not dead. Okay, now they're really dead. The worst one I think is there's a scene where the Siren Sarah character has like this. It's really nicely done actually. You got this strobe lighting going on, and her face changes from being cute to like monstrous, and it actually stays scary for the rest of the movie. But in between the strobes, it switches from normal to scary, and I thought that was a great touch. But then it cuts, and you think, okay, so she's right on top of the guy, she's got the guy. But then when we go back to that room, he's now fine, and both
Yeah.
of the animatronics that were right on top of him are just gone, and then they attack and kill him, and I just felt like, why was this scene here? It
Yeah.
felt completely, they just forgot where to put it.
Yeah, there was a one earlier too with the same character where she attacked somebody, and again, like it just you get the impression that oh, she got that character's dead, and then we cut away, we cut back, and both characters are perfectly fine. And I'm not sure what was going on. It's almost like there were multiple people in the editing room,
Hmm.
like or they had people take different passes at it, and it just slipped through somehow. If that was the case, I don't know.
Well, jumping into the characters, again, like I said about Nick Cage, about the only thing we really knew about his character was that he was former service. He likes pinball.
He really likes pinball.
That's about, and he likes, the punch pop. I was honestly watching the movie looking for what do we know about this character, and
Yeah.
that's all we're given. That's literally all we're given.
His reaction to the situation is really surreal.
Hmm.
I was trying to follow along. I was like, all right, if I'm this guy and, I'm not speaking for whatever reason, um, my car's clearly been deliberately sabotaged and I'm being manipulated into having to stay overnight in this place. It's like, all right, well, at a certain level, I'm just going to accept it. As long as I can leave in the morning, it's fine. And there's a certain point where I wrote down the ostrich. Once the ostrich attack
Hmm.
happens, it's time to leave or at least react in some capacity more than just like, well, this situation sucks. I'll just go along with it, to being like, oh man, these are animatronic things attacking me. It makes me wonder if it was almost deliberate, like he knew what he was getting into, like he knew that they were going to be animatronic things that he wanted to attack, so he wasn't surprised. He was just waiting for the opportunity to attack them.
What you're talking about kind of goes into the idea that they kind of ripped off or paid homage or attempted the similar story, whatever how you want to phrase it. Basically, they did their attempt at Five Nights at Freddy's.
Yeah.
In Five Nights at Freddy's, one of the setups is that the night security guard is told that at night the animatronics tend to wander a bit.
Okay.
So the idea that they're told preemptively, you might see them move around at nighttime. They weren't really given a nighttime mode, so they just kind of do their own thing. And then as the nights go on, it gets progressively more stressful, more threatening. There's an
Yeah.
elevation of stakes. And like you said, had just a character mentioned, like, oh, don't worry about the animatronics. They're a bit quirky after all these years. You might see them pop up or move around at different places. Like the whole reveal of the animatronic doing something or misbehaving, if somebody had just mentioned, even in a slight line of passing, it would have explained a little bit of the tolerating what's happening. Because, like you mentioned, when that first animatronic tries to attack him, he doesn't immediately lose his mind. He does definitely wait for the animatronic to strike first blood, as it were, before he
Yeah.
dismantles it.
He reacts to it very, if he had been warned and if it had been a gradual escalation, like let's say the ostrich was just moving by itself and he's all like, oh, that's weird, and then it seems to attack him or it subtly is threatening,
Mm-hmm.
and then by accident he trashes it or he knocks it over or something, and he's all like, well, that was weird. I didn't, it wasn't a fight right away. It wasn't a confrontation right away. It was more subtle. And then by the end of it, he's ripping the spines out. But he rips the spine out of the ostrich, right? The first
Yes,
one.
the very first one he kills is
Yeah.
the Ozzy the ostrich, and he rips his spine out in a
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat move.
It's almost like he is the audience surrogate in that he knows Five Nights at Freddy's. He knows exactly what's happening, and he's just along for the ride and going to enjoy it to a degree, even with all the physical times he's injured and everything like that. He just kind of gets past it and just like, I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to fight all these. It's almost like he is reacting the way fans of Five Nights at Freddy's would react. So I don't know. It's somebody didn't write this around that. There's definitely a certain level of understanding and expectation of what the source material was. So quote unquote source material.
Well, and that's the big thing about the animatronics themselves. Again, it definitely comes from the idea that, like, well, if we're going to turn this into a 90-minute feature, we've got to add more to it. Because in Five Nights at Freddy's, there are only four basic animatronics. You've
Mm-hmm.
got Freddy, you've got Chica, you've got Bonnie, and you have Foxy. And that's it. The original Five Nights at Freddy's really only had four animatronics. Do you remember how many are in this movie?
Was it seven?
Eight.
Eight. Oh
Yeah.
wow.
The movie, the animals were the Pink Lizard, the Tito Turtle, Sarah Siren, Willy Weasel, the Ozzy Ostrich, Gus Gorilla, the Nighty Knight, the Crocodile. I did not catch his name. So there were eight total animatronics, which is twice the number, and I feel like that's very
Yeah.
deliberate of Five Nights at Freddy's. And again, it feels completely unnecessary. You really could have tightened that down to four or five,
I would have
specific.
done 3.
Well, I was saying you could have done 4 or 5 specific animatronics with personalities and a slower burn and
Yeah.
let their deaths feel a little more earned. Because, like you said, the ripping the spine out felt like he was getting vengeance on it. All this ostrich really did was like scratch his cheek.
And speaking of the animatronics, there were obviously people in costumes. They didn't have the money to build an actual animatronic, and that's fair. I understand that. But they none of them had any training to make them feel like they were moving like they were robotically. They were just people in costumes, pretty obviously. There was a couple times when they tried to do robot arms, but for the most part, it was kind of a haphazard effect. And again, if you had a smaller number of animatronic characters, you could cast one stunt person who's good at that and put them in the close-up shots because they're full body covered anyway. You know what I mean? They could be into different costumes. And then on the wide shots, you can get random person standing or whatever.
Well, this definitely goes into the problem with the animatronics story aspect of it themselves, because it's fine that the rules aren't told to the main character explicitly, but they should at least be consistent. And again, all I really can keep doing is comparing it to Five Nights at Freddy's, but over the course of the 5 days, on the first night, the animatronics barely move. And some animatronics almost don't move at all.
Right.
By the end of the fifth night, they're all very, very active, and they can all be potentially threatening. And this movie, it didn't seem to explain the reasoning for it. There would be characters who would leave the stage, but then seem to return to the stage and then power back down. And it was almost like, okay, do they have a limited charge? Do they have to return to the stage? Do they need to consume people for reasons? Like, we're not told anything as far as the why. We're told the backstory on the animatronics themselves, yes, but a lot of the specifics for understanding the threat, we're just left guessing.
Yeah, and I'm presuming in Five Nights at Freddy's, the escalation is a big part of it
Mm-hmm.
because the presumption is they aren't necessarily murderous right away.
Right.
So when he's attacked by the ostrich in the first 20 minutes of the movie, it's like, okay, time to take a crowbar to all of them right now because they're just standing there. You know what I mean?
I took detailed notes about the 8 animatronics and specifically their deaths. The second animatronic to die was Gus Gorilla. Now, Gus Gorilla dies in probably the most brutal way. And we just talked about him ripping out a spine of the Ozzy Ostrich character, but poor Gus Gorilla, do you remember what he says right before he dies?
No, I forgot. I thought we were friends.
And then Nick Cage curb stomps him through a urinal.
Oh god.
Nighty Night. Do you remember how he died?
Let's see. Not exactly.
He was decapitated with his own sword.
Oh, okay.
So that was the third animatronic. The fourth animatronic to die was the crocodile.
Yes, it broke his bill a little bit, or ripped out something out of him.
Right.
He had like a clear, like CG tongue at one point in one of the wide shots, but it wasn't what he ripped out.
Nope.
So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it would have made more sense if he'd at least ripped out his tongue and presumably something connected
That
to
killed
it.
him somehow.
But yeah, he just rips out what I wrote down as just tonsils because he reaches into his mouth, rips something
Tonsillitis.
out, and he's dead. So yeah, the crocodile died from his tonsils being ripped out. The fifth one to die was ironically kind of a fake out, but it was the siren Sarah.
Yeah.
She had the teabagging neck snap, whatever was supposed to be happening in that moment.
Nicolas Cage's signature move.
Of course. And so that was like very, very lame. Then after her, you had the lizard, the pink lizard, who had presumably been lassoed to death because he smashes her all around the room when she's tied up with the rope. As he's like yelling and screaming, and she's kind of like twitching, but she's not dead, as we find out, because she gets back up later. And then he kind of elbows her to the ground, and we're like, okay, is she dead now?
Very gentle elbow, because he was handcuffed.
Then he walks over to her and then just rips her head off. So
right, unceremoniously.
So I feel like that character died 3 times. It really, really killed that character. Then, ironically, the 7th one to die was Willy himself.
Yeah, because the Hispanic one did not die until the last shot of the movie.
Presumably, we're supposed to believe that the siren Sarah is dead, so that's why Willy would be number 7, who he gets bludgeoned and also his head gets ripped off. Then you finally get to the last one, Tito Turtle, who got ran over by a
Yeah.
car. Oh man, it was such a strange compilation because I also took notes of all the idiot friends and how they died, and it's so much less effort was put into their deaths. Unbelievably, how much less effort was put into their deaths. You have
Yeah.
stabbed, the first one, eaten, neck snap. That's it.
Um,
That's all we're given. Yeah, it's.
we're giving almost the exact amount of character development for them too.
Oh, I think Idiot Friends was a good summation for everybody.
That's pretty much everybody. Yeah, it's like there's nothing else to it. We didn't even get an opportunity to get to know them at all.
I wrote down the main character, the main teenage character's name, 3 times in my notes because I kept forgetting her name.
Live, yeah.
I kept forgetting her name. And then after I wrote it down, I was like, was that supposed to be a joke that she's the final girl and her name's Liv?
She's going to live.
I didn't know if maybe they were trying to be clever with that because like I kept forgetting her name.
It's giving him too much credit again. The motivations were kind of clear. Nicolas Cage just wants to survive the night
Sure.
and enjoy his pinball. Liv wants to see the whole place destroyed, and I felt like she was pretty consistent. Her adoptive sheriff mom wants to continue the arrangement to protect the people of the town. And then when she finds out that Liv is in danger, she changes her mind to get Liv out of there. But then when she realizes that Nicolas Cage has been killing the animatronics, she arrests or not arrests him, but handcuffs him, leaves him in there to die in the hope to just end the whole thing. And then of course he gets free. And then she tries one more time. All right, I'm just going to hold him at gunpoint
Sure.
until Willy can come eat him. And then she herself, of course, gets eaten. So I guess everybody's motivation is relatively clear, but there's no characterization within that. There's no change. There's no arc. There's no nothing.
Well, I will say this definitely kind of draws to the conclusion of the movie. I had so many questions. There were several shots of and again, I kept singing the "There's the girl that I like" from
Right. Yeah. The long looks at the young teenage character,
between
Nicolas
yeah
Cage.
Nicolas Cage and our main teenage protagonist one, and the ending of the movie is them driving off together, and I still don't know what we're supposed to feel about that scene. Like they both got
Yeah.
out of the town, so hooray! But there's no more
Yeah.
animatronics, so does it matter?
Yeah. It made me think of From Dusk Till Dawn because that movie ends in a similar way where you have your male protagonist and your teenage protagonist are the only two that survive.
Mm-hmm.
And spoiler alert for a 25-year-old movie. But she's a young girl and there's this impressive guy that survived and she's like, hey, I'll come along with you. And I think George Clooney says something like, I may be a bastard, but I'm not a fucking bastard.
Do you think that they were intentionally trying to set this up for a sequel? Because they have 2 animatronics that kind of bounce back from dead. Like you have Tito Turtle who somehow catches up to the cop car, somehow unloads the shotgun, and somehow makes it all the way back toward the restaurant before getting run over. But then you also have the Siren Sarah character who had her neck snapped and then wakes up in the trash bag to blow up the Texas guy's car. And are we supposed to assume that she's dead, or did she survive that as well? What do you think?
I feel like she probably survived that, but I don't know if they were thinking sequel. I think it would be more explicit.
Mm-hmm.
I think the final shot of the movie would be Willie's eyes lighting back up or something like that, to be more obvious about it. I'm rewatching Nightmare on Elm Street series, and almost every single one of those ends with some sort of either overt or a very subtle little clue that maybe it's not over. In those movies, the rules change like movie to movie, so it doesn't really matter because it's all metaphysical allegory things anyway. And I feel like in universe, Freddy's just like, you know what? You guys win. You beat me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take a break. And he just lets it go and then he comes back. With this, the rules are so vague. I could kind of see it being like, he rebuilt himself and all of his friends. They're robots. They can be rebuilt. And like Chucky as well. He's murdered multiple times and always comes back as long as his physical body can be rebuilt. But that was the other point I made earlier. Is like, if you want a movie with an animatronic critter with a murderer put in him, there's an alternative. It's not Five Nights at Freddy's, the movie that hasn't been released yet. It's Child's Play. You can even watch the remade Child's Play. I had more fun with that than this.
So then, ultimately, what would you rate this movie?
Um, I thought about it. I mean, I did actually pay for this. I've got the disc, but normally I evaluate things based on how much and what I would pay. Like, is this a $30 4K? Is it a $25 Blu-ray? Is it a $10 to $15 Blu-ray, $2 DVD? This one, upon a second viewing, it is a cable. I would not go out of my way to seek this out. It's just if it's on, I may watch it just to try to think about it, but I wouldn't spend money.
So this is a wait till it comes on TV.
Wait till it comes on regular ass TV
That seems pretty fair.
or streaming. Either way.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us again. We are Suspenders of Belief.
Next week on Suspenders of Belief, I think we're going to cover a little known movie called Drop Dead Gorgeous.
Oh God, why that one?
Why? Oh, you're going to love it. You're going to love it so much. It holds up so well. And by that, I mean, I'm not sure. I hope it holds up as well as I remember.
I guess we'll find out.